Welcome back to the Playoffs of Life podcast with your host, Adrian Hatcher. And today we're finally going to get into it. The trade deadline went down, and a couple of some really good players were traded to some really good teams. Teams such as the Knicks, they solidified a lot of their bench depth as well as maybe some of their starting lineup with Julius Randle being out. And it looks like Jalen Brunson got hurt a couple games ago, which means these trades are great for this team. They got people like Bogdanovich and Alec Burks. The 76ers went and got Buddy Hield. Everybody has wanted Buddy Hield for a minute. Just a great shooter. We'll get more into that. Also, the Hornets traded for PJ Washington. I think that's a really good trade, actually. I've seen PJ play with Charlotte, and I think his talents were not being utilized. I think he will play so much better with them. Also, the Suns, they got a little sneaky, but they got some really good wing depth on their team. All that and more on this episode of the Playoffs of Life podcast. If you like what you hear, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube, and also follow us on social media platforms. And let's get into the weekly grind. All right, a team that was at the very top of the Eastern Conference who have slid a little bit due to injuries as well. The 76ers went and got Buddy Hield. Now, in the 76ers case, Joel Embid got hurt. That's your star player. It's really hard to replicate the amount of production a 70-point scorer who gets hurt is when he's off your team. It's really hard to bring the type of production needed to replace that until he comes back. So the front office has said that Joel Embiid will most likely have at least a month to 2 month period where they're reevaluating him and hoping he can come back. That puts him around that April timeline, May timeline, around when the playoffs are supposed to start. Hopefully he can get some games in. That's if he is healthy and if he actually can return, because he did have a torn meniscus. It's a very serious injury. But we're going to go with the assumption that he will return. So when he does, Buddy Hield can also step into that Bogdanovich role, whether you have him in the starting lineup or you have him coming off the bench. A solid all-around player. Their defense may not be elite, but it could work in a system. They can shoot the lights out. So I really feel like the 76ers, who are already a great team without a Buddy Hield, have just increased their chances if Joel Embiid does come back. Now, they did trade away Patrick Beverley. I don't know how the 76ers feel about Patrick Beverley. I like Patrick Beverley on that team. He has a podcast. I think it's the Pat Bev podcast. And he was having a really good time being in Philadelphia. I think he felt like the fans really loved him for his play, his tenacity, the way he goes about the game. So I don't know if they feel like trading him away was for a good reason. But all in all, I think him going to the Bucks was a necessary evil. I think the Bucks needed a defensive type of scorer at the same time, a point guard who can lead the team, keep the offense going, because the Bucks really are looking for answers where the only answer you can really see is either better effort on the defensive end or getting better players. And they went and got a better defensive player, the 2 of 2. So with the 76ers, though, Buddy Hield was their grand deadline trade. I think it was a great trade. I think they already are on the top. I can't say they're going to be any better. As long as Joel Embiid comes back and they have the same cohesiveness that they had all year, they're going to be great. So let's get to the next team and let's see if they can top what the 76ers did in this trade deadline. All right, so here's where it gets juicy. Pause. I think that's my first pause moment on the podcast. Dear Lord. Here's where it gets good. So I feel like the Dallas Mavericks actually had a better trade deadline than the Knicks and the 76ers. So in the case of the Knicks and the Sixers, they already had a team that was most likely going to not only get into the playoffs, but were guaranteed like a second round berth, almost a conference finals type of deal. Those two teams are that good. And that was before the deadline ever happened. But a team that no one could really pinpoint how good they would be due to how their season is going is the Dallas Mavericks. You know, Luka, Kyrie, you know, and then the role players. The thing is, Kyrie hasn't really played this year. He's had a couple really good games. And when they are on the floor together, Luka and Kyrie look amazing. But with Kyrie being out with so much time, and now he's actually come back and he's been balling again, it just so happens that the trade deadline rolled around when Kyrie was making his return. And for a good, and it came at a really good time because they went and got something that I think was very, very needed. And that's a forward since Dorian Finney-Smith left. A really, really, really good all-around forward. Now, they had Grant Williams, but apparently Grant Williams wasn't doing what they needed when they picked him up during the offseason. I don't know the details behind it. I think Grant Williams is a really good player, but apparently for the Dallas Mavericks, he wasn't good enough. So now we get into PJ Washington. And PJ Washington, when you hear that name, you think, oh, off the Charlotte Hornets, he's not going to be that good. I mean, of course, PJ looks like a really good forward. He's in a really bad system. Anything can look good when you're playing for the Charlotte Hornets. But I really feel like PJ has a real all around game. He may even have a better game because he can play better defense. He's in a system of winning. He's in a more organized culture. He's a really good offensive player. He can shoot the ball. He's had games where he just shoots the lights out. And of course, he comes back down to earth. He's more of an average everyday shooter who can get hot, who's very streaky. But when he's on, he's on. And that's kind of what you need. You need a surprise in the playoffs. We know what Kyrie's going to do. We know what Luka's going to do. What can PJ do for you? And I think what he was doing for the Hornets can be reciprocated with the Dallas Mavericks, but even on a higher level, if that makes sense. Players really go with not only their system, but with what they are basically betting on themselves, determination, what is motivating them. And when you put a player on a better team and they're a really good player, things they start doing are more highlighted, which means more confidence, which means better results. And for a team that no one could really say was going to make it to a second round or a Western Conference Finals with the amount of talent around the league and the amount of other teams that look better than them, I think a move like this is very underrated, which is why I would give the Dallas Mavericks an A+, in my opinion. I feel like they won the trade deadline just off this move in itself. This move actually put them on another level. Now, is it good enough to compete with the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, Clippers? Maybe. But if they would have stayed pat at the deadline, I definitely could say they couldn't compete with those teams. But they made moves. And they also are going through other injuries on their team and trying to get that cohesiveness with the rest of their teammates. So I feel like they have a lot of time to develop and show that they can be a really good team come the playoffs. Because you know what Luka's going to do, and he can carry you there. But he also needs help. So I feel like PJ Washington is the help that he has asked for. Maybe not in the form of another superstar, and maybe things will happen later in the year and after the season. But for right now, for the present, you do what you need to do to see how far you can go. So Dallas Mavericks are my winner for the trade deadline. We have one more team to check out. So let's head to the next team. All right, as we start in on this next team, I want to give this team a lot of credit. I did not believe they would be able to do anything during the trade deadline, seeing as they mortgaged their entire future on the backs of a Bradley Beal, a Kevin Durant, and a Devin Booker, and some decent role players. But the Phoenix Suns went out and made a very sneaky trade. 2 trades, actually. So they went to another team that is having a weird season. But this team is having a much weirder season than them. This team has had not major injuries. This team has had a lot of turmoil, and this team is losing a lot of games. They went to the Grizzlies, and they got David Roddy, which if you've been watching Grizzly games, David Roddy has been able to play. He's like a a typical good forward who's been playing, I believe, like the shooting guard, the shooting forward spot for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's been getting a lot of playing time because the Memphis Grizzlies have been ran through with injuries, which opened up the gates for a lot of their young players. Shout out to Gigi Jackson and Vix Williams. Man, like the wing depth that they didn't know they had until this season, even though no one wants to find out this way. But the wing depth that the Grizzlies have is actually very, very solid, very good. And I think it's actually opening the door to those players actually getting real minutes come time for next season. I think this is a good and a bad thing for the Grizzlies. But let's get back to the Suns. So the Suns, when they got David Roddy, and they also traded to get Royce O'Neal. Now, those two names don't jump off the page. You know, solid wings who can shoot, tough defenders, all around players. That's what you need, especially for the Suns. The Suns are in an area of basketball where your top three players are your window. Without them, you have no shot. If one of them goes down, bam, there goes your shot. You need all three of those players to be healthy and to produce at the level that they've produced their entire career, right? Come to playoff time. But the one thing, other than injuries, that you couldn't count on is whether or not your role players could do what they're supposed to do. So what do you do in that case? You get more role players. You get better role players. You upgrade your role players to alleviate the stress that you have on your star players. I guarantee you both of these players will find a way not only to get really good minutes in the rotation, but may even start for you come some games. That's the type of role players you want to got. Royce O'Neal has been really good. He was great on the Utah Jazz. He's been traded a couple times since then. You know, he made his way to the team he was with the Nets. And we all know the Nets have a whole bunch of wings on their team. Wings that could really help a lot of contenders. And now he's on a team with superstars and he has a chance to compete for a real title. And I think this is great. I think he will play great for that team. We haven't seen any games with them yet, but I have a lot of confidence. And like I said, David Roddy with the Grizzlies, he was getting really solid playing time, showing what he could do in this league. And now he's going to get an opportunity with a title contention team. If he can find his way into that rotation, it's going to be beautiful. So I can't wait to see that. I'm actually more excited to watch Sun games. I wasn't really watching them because I knew if Booker wasn't going off, Kevin wasn't going off, or Bill wasn't going off, it was tough. They've had a lot of second half comebacks, third quarter, fourth quarter comebacks off the backs of their players. But I'm really observing that how they got into those deficits. And now maybe these role players help defensively, offensively alleviate all that pressure and give them a better team overall is what I'm hoping for. So just like the Dallas Mavericks, I think they made small moves that can turn out big come playoff time, which makes them bigger winners for the trade deadline than, let's say, the Sixers, let's say any other team. So with that being said, that was not all the trades that went down, but those were the most important trades that I felt that the trade deadline brought to us, graced us with. And I am even more excited to watch more games. But with that being said, let's go ahead and let's get into the hoop session for this week. All right, for those who are new to the podcast, the hoop session are basically NBA games that we look forward to for this upcoming week, games that we want to see, games where I feel like you're going to see the top echelon of NBA basketball, the game that we love so much. So let's start the hoop session off with the first game, which is going to be February 12th. It's going to be a battle between the Nuggets and the Bucks at 8 p.m. It is a battle between two of the top teams in their respective conferences. the Bucks, who have dealt with the issue of playing no defense and trying to change it up by getting a new coach mid-season leading into the All-Star break. We're trying to see how many wins they can get with their new coach, see the new system that's apparently going to be implemented, or the way that they change up their culture and the way that they play. But they are going to have to basically figure this out on the fly because they have to face a Nuggets team that hasn't really fallen off, that hasn't really changed up what they do. They still have a top 10 player in the league right now in Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray's balling. Their whole team is basically getting the cohesiveness they need, even with the players that they've gotten in the last trade deadline, and even with the players that are still there, like an Aaron Gordon and what's his name, Christian Braun. They've really developed. So I really feel like the Nuggets and the Bucks are going to have this exciting all around matchup. Like I said, two of the top teams. I'm always excited to see a game where great basketball is played. I'm not 100% sure if the Bucks are going to bring it, but I'm hoping that this will be a game where we can say, man, I love the NBA. All right, next game. This one is going to be a battle. We got the Kings versus the Suns on February 13th at 10 p.m. It is a late game, but for some reason, the NBA always schedules these late games, and I always stay up to watch because the Kings are still great. They're still balling. I love that they got Demontis Sabonis. Even though it's been a minute since they got him, I think that was such a huge move for their team. He is like an offensive hub for them. De'Aaron Fox, if he has done nothing but get better. And yes, he has gotten injured a couple times throughout the season, even throughout the last few years. But those injuries have just opened up the opportunity for other players to get some shine. And they actually stood a little bit pat at the trade deadline. They didn't really make too many moves. I still feel like they're a top team. Malik Monk is only growing and developing even more as a player. So going up against a team like the Suns, who we talked about in the weekly grind, we just talked about it. They got some really good role players on their team, which is much needed because as the three stars go, the Suns go. But when you put these two teams together, you are talking about high octane offense. Maybe a little bit of defense, but I'm thinking a high scoring game. I'm thinking something like a Pacers versus Atlanta type of vibe, 130 points for both squads. But these are just going to be some all around great games to watch. So watch out for that game, February 13th, the Kings versus the Suns. All right. Next game we got is the Knicks versus the Magic. Now I know what you're saying. The Magic? Yeah, the Magic. You know, one of the top defensive teams in the league. You know, one of the rising stars. Oh, I'm sorry, not one, two. Two rising stars in Paolo and France, you know. And you're also thinking that, oh, well, you know, they may actually have a shot against the Knicks. Knicks are missing some really good players. OG, Julius, Mitchell, you know, they actually got a good shot. And you would be right because the Magic are a team that do not quit. They are a team that battles it out. They're actually battling my Bulls right now as we speak. They're only down by 2 as of this recording. Man, their Magic is tough. But yes, their defense and sometimes their offense comes alive. And when that happens, they play a exciting brand of basketball. Really tough nose, all in your face, physical brand of basketball that I love to watch. And they're going up against the Knicks. We already know how good the Knicks are. I don't know if Jalen Brunson is going to play this game. But if he does, it'll make it even better. Looking into this game, I'm thinking a player like Dante steps up. I'm thinking a player like Josh Hart steps up. I'm even thinking a player like maybe Precious Achua since he's came. I think they're going to need all hands on deck for this team. But we will see. A very young team, but going up against a team like the Knicks, you're going to have to bring your A game defensively, which I think they will do. And then I think the offense will carry them to a great result. I'm probably going to go for the Knicks still in this case, though. The Knicks are just so good to watch this year. So that is good for the hoop session. Let's go ahead and get into the under the radar segment. All right, let's get into the Under the Radar segment. For those who are new, Under the Radar segment is all about highlighting the players who have played their hearts out and gave to the NBA, contributed in a way that we didn't foresee, or maybe we did, but I just think we should highlight their games. So for that first player, we're going to talk about Brandon Miller, who went off for 33 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 steals in a game on February 5th against the Lakers. Now, they lost the game 124 to 118, but Brandon Miller's rookie campaign has been up and down, and these are the games where you truly see why he was picked as a top 5 pick. I think Brandon Miller has always been that one of one player. Like, he has the game, he has the talk, the confidence. He just needed the development and the time. And Hornets fans are really getting to see what he can do for their team. Shout out to Brandon Miller for this game. I really feel like he can keep this up for the rest of the year. There's so much excitement to have with a Hornets team that is trying to rebuild. He's the type of player you rebuild around. So let's get into the next game and the next player. I think this player was actually on the last Under the Radar segment, but we're going to bring him back. On a game on February 6th, the Knicks beat the Grizzlies 123 to 113. And who else but Dante DiVincenzo stepping up for his team? Role play of the year so far. Waiver pickup of the year if you play fantasy basketball. He went off for 32 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and 3 steals. Dante DiVincenzo, do your thing, do your thing. My man has been on fire, shooting the ball lights out. I think it is like his second or third game putting up at least 30 points since Julius Randle went down. I mean, what else can you ask for from one of your role players? I feel like Dante has really shown that he is a Knicks player. You already loved him before. And now, with you trying to keep these wins going, he's just that much more important. So let's highlight these types of games because we may not always get them. Shout out to you, Dante, for doing your thing. Next, we have the Detroit Pistons going up against the Kings in a win for the Pistons, 133 to 120. And who spearheaded the win but Jaden Ivey? I've heard a lot of talk about Jaden Ivey this year, mostly about who was going to trade for him. Because obviously, Monty Williams was not going to play this man enough for him to put up games like this. But with the trade deadline coming and Jaden did not leave that team, this may be one of the games that got him to stay. I don't know. The Bulls were really trying to go after him. I don't now. Let's say this. I don't know if they were actually going to get him, but we all knew Jaden Ivey was a player. We all know he could ball out. He just needs the opportunity and the time. Him, Brandon Miller, these are the type of players that they just need time, and they have to find their own game within the game. With him, he went off for 33 points, 5 assists, and 6 rebounds. Now, I didn't watch the game. And if I'm being honest, I don't watch a lot of Pistons games. If you're not a Pistons fan, I don't think you really would have known about this. So that's why I think he is truly an under the radar type of player for this segment. Shout out to you, Jaden Ivey. Keep doing your thing in Detroit. Let's see you get another win for them. And last but not least, on February 8th, the Orlando Magic beat the San Antonio Spurs 127 to 111. Their player, or their under the radar player, was Franz Wagner with 34 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds, and 2 blocks. Good Lord. I am so disappointed that my Bulls did not keep that pick that eventually got Franz Wagner. I would have loved him on my team, but alas, the Orlando Magic made a good move. Most likely got one of their stars, one of their foundation pieces. This man is balling. He's been balling all year. Him and Paolo have been like the dynamic duo, whatever, however you want to put it. Batman, Robin, Robin, Batman. This man can play ball, man. 34 points. And he plays great. He plays good defense while doing this, while leading a team. Now, they're not looked at as one of those top teams, but as a young team, you have to develop, you have to take the time. I feel like I say that so much. But with the Orlando Magic, they've had a lot of time to develop their players, but they haven't always hit. With Franz Wagner, they definitely hit. So now you gotta battle. Now you gotta take those hits. You gotta get to some playoffs or some play-ins. You gotta win. You gotta lose, come back, and fight again. This is that type of year for them. And Franz Wagner has been leading the way for them. He is one of the under the radar players of the week. So, with that being said, guys, thank you for listening. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Also, you can follow us on all our social media platforms. It'd be greatly appreciated. And we will see you guys next week with another episode of the Playoffs of Life podcast. Bye, guys.